You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. One of the things that separates sidemount diving from its backmount cousin is there is no one universally accepted way of configuring and diving your sidemount system as there is in DIR backmount diving. Much of this comes down to the harness that you use, but more than that, it's driven by the specific dive application. A sump diving setup can and most likely will be very different from that used in general cave diving, in wreck diving, deep open water, or recreational sidemount diving. And it's not just your harness. The application then in turn will drive your regulator setup, your cylinder selection and setup, and that's ignoring the instructor you choose who will have his or her way of doing things right. Or let's be more specific to sidemount and say, doing what works. As you will already know from this podcast, my many videos and my Sidemount Fundamentals ebook, I dive the X-Deep Stealth 2.0 tech and a number of applications, and I love it. My sidemount diving setup and techniques have been heavily influenced by this equipment choice and by my instructors and their predecessors, including Jason Renaud, Tom Steiner as instructors, and the likes of Steve Bogart, Steve Martin, Audrey Cadell, and Patrick Woodman as role models. So when I first learned of and saw Toddy Style sidemount being used by some of the ISE instructors that came through Gozo Technical Diving, my initial response was, why would you want to do that? I was also involved a while back in a very detailed forum discussion regarding the DIR requirement to donate what you breathe in a gas sharing scenario and whether it was particularly relevant to sidemount. I maintain that it is not. However, that is not to say that donating what you are breathing and then passing off a cylinder is wrong. No, far from it. For me, it's just another way of doing what works, just not my way. But given that my own remit for this podcast is to be open and willing to learn about different ways of diving sidemount, I thought it would be a great idea to get the man himself on the show. Thorsten Waelde, or Toddy, is the owner of Protec Sardinia and the inventor of the Toddy Style sidemount systems. And as well, we'll learn today he is one of the world's top divers and explorers and a great guy as well. Today, Toddy and I go deep into his background in diving. We'll learn all about Toddy Style sidemount, diving in beautiful Sardinia, Italy. And then I was really pleased to be able to learn more about the exciting T-Reb sidemount rebreather that is very soon coming to market. All this and much more on this episode of Speaking Sidemount. With me today, I have Thorsten Waelde, or Toddy of Protec Sardinia. Thorsten, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hello, guys. Thanks a lot to invite me, Steve, in this interview. Yeah, I'm looking forward to answer your questions.
As I told you off mic, I've known of you for some years through Tom Steiner when I was at Gozo Technical. So great to catch up, albeit from opposite sides of the world. And I understand you've just got back from Boot Dusseldorf, so I'm really interested how the show went and what you thought of it.
Yeah, the show went very well. It was really amazing. We had a lot of interesting people. They came over. They had a look at a Sidemount. So we give a lot of talks, and I met super cool guys as well and some friends as well. Even as well, Patrick Whitman was there, so we had a cool chat together. That was fantastic. And as well, of course, many people asked for Protec Sardinia, the diving center I run in Sardinia.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I have to get to that show sometime. I've been considering it, so at some stage I'll combine it with a trip maybe to Sardinia as well. We'll talk about that later. So by way of background for our listeners, how did you get into diving?
It was about 8 to 9, something like that. It was like a situation. My mother had that house in a bigger town in the Black Forest area. And I met a guy, he was in the Canadian Air Base stationary. He was a tank driver, something like that. So he was living in an apartment, and in his basement, he had some tanks. And I was always fascinated about diving and everything, you know. So I read a lot of books and everything. So I asked this guy, hey, do you do some diving or whatever? Maybe I can have a test dive or whatever. And he said to me, of course, yeah, you come over into the base. There was a small lake. So he put some gear, just like a harness and a back blade and a tank in the back and a regulator. And he told me, look, Toddy, just jump in the water and go down and start to breathe. So I didn't have any idea. So I went down, I breathed from the regulator, it came up and I was screaming. I was like, wow, fascinating. I had a time where I had possibilities with these guys from Canada to go a little bit on the weekends. Me as a young boy, it was fantastic sitting on pickups and driving to lakes and do some diving. So a year after, I decided to make this a little bit in a proper way, because maybe some information about decompression or safety stops, I didn't have any clue about that. So I booked myself into a proper class, and I've done actually a classical PADI open water diver and a CMS 1-star diver. And then I learned really how to dive. It was a funny class for sure. After that, I really decided to go further on, and I actually was really addicted to it. Every weekend I went out, I helped in a diving center, and after 2 or 3 years later, I actually started to open my first diving center. It was at the beginning of the 90s, something like that. And that time, I was focused on diving regularly, and then I started to go further. We opened the second center in the second year, and in the fourth year, we had the third center. So after a while, we decided to bring it together to 600 square meters, big facility, IDC center, stuff like that. So the 90s was like very busy for me in diving general with like open water divers, and all courses up to instructors. And as well, I get very soon interesting about technical diving. So I start 94, 95 with my first class from INDD. So I was hooked into technical diving at the beginning. And then I start technical diving, trimix diving, but mainly for fun. It was not like my main work, but it was so strong influence of myself that I decided end of the 90s, I think it was 98 or 99, to really go to Mexico and do a cave training. And after I came back, I was like hooked on, because it was mind-blowing. I spent about 3 or 4 weeks there in Mexico, done my training. And when I came back, it was crazy. I built my own cave in my center, and tried to sell some equipment from diaphragm and stuff like that. Yes. So it was crazy. It was like moving on, and I decided, okay, I have to do something other in my life, not just like the center. And I always went back to Mexico, sometimes 2 times in a year. And 2001, I decided to move to Mexico and live permanently in Mexico for a couple of years, just to build up my knowledge, to become a cave instructor and teach a lot and dive a lot and actually explore a lot. So that was a little bit about my background. After a couple of years, I realized, okay, I want to have a little bit more as well. I know Mexico now. I've done a lot of dives there. What can I do? Is there a possibility to come back to Europe? And I tried to get more information, and then I figured out, there is an island called Sardinia. This would be very, very interesting, because there is a lot of geology history behind it. And as well, I realized from Speleo magazines and Speleo contacts that there are caves, but nobody knows. So I had a first trip in 2003 to visit the island. I was driving around, and I found a fantastic limestone area called Supramonte. And I'd done the first dives there. I asked a diving center just like to hop in, and maybe they can drop me later a couple of hours later. So they'd done it, got safe. And I realized, wow, these caves are just like amazing. So when I came back, I had the idea to do something, and that was a big move for me, to stop Mexico and come over to Europe. And as well, my girlfriend is from Sardinia, so that's great, So why not come here, live here, and do some work here? And actually from 2004, I'm living in Sardinia now. And 2005, I actually opened Protec Sardinia, actually the cave training center in Europe. I do a lot of cave trainings in every kind of activity, like Sidemount cave and CCR cave and explorations as well. And since that years, I'm completely focused in Sardinia as well, and other projects, of course, but mainly my living is in Sardinia.
Amazing. And through that period, it must have been the time when the growth in Sidemount was happening through the mid-2000s?
Yes, actually, my first contact with Sidemount was in 1999. It was after my training in the caves. I met guys like Bill Phillips, for example, and Steve Bogerts and other guys. So I had an influence of seeing people going into caves with this particular configuration. So actually, one of the first dives after my training was an expedition dive with Robbie Schmidtner together. And we explored about 500 meters of cave. And the timer was ready for Sidemount because we had to bring gear further to remote cenotes. So we don't want to carry back mounts, we want to carry on side mounts. Right. So after that experience, I realized, oh, wow, side mount is a key. But of course, pretty sure nobody of us started that way and start to think about this will be something more open for the public for sport diving, and the industry will go on for that. So it was just like for us a tool, like to really carry on gear, go in tight spaces and stuff like that. And we just played with different kind of gears and build up gears, and yeah, that was the way. It was 99.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it was very much make your own gear, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. So we done I had a luxury. I had a cool trip to Merida, because in Merida there are a lot of sinkholes, and I had a possibility to explore there some sinkholes like Homoon, for example. There was a big documentation in National Geographic a couple of years ago. So friends of mine explored, and 2 months later he told me that, hey, Toddy, go there. There are some skulls inside and whatever. So I take my gear. I have rope experience. I went there. I built up my own side mount with a rig on it, with a climbing rig on it. And I met as well Kurt Bowden, and I saw the first prototype of the Armadillo. And for me, it was like, oh, wow, what's that? What's that, dude? So I was with him in a cenote in Merida, and he explained me a little bit what he's building up. So I went back a week later. I tried to rebuild or tried to copy the Armadillo system by myself. It was working, it was good, but it was never so good as the Armadillo itself. But of course, yeah, I bought systems, I played with Transpac systems, I played with Scuba Pro, like stabilizing jackets, stuff like that, So always I was in an experimental mode and figured out what will be the best. And that was a little bit the time where I saw the first time, I think it was 2001, the guy, he came over from Florida. There was like a ferry over from Florida to Cancun, I think a year or something like that. So they came over with his van, full loaded with caving gear. And I saw a sandwich system. I saw 2 back plates and a wing between. And I saw it underwater, and I was not happy. I said, well, no, that's not the way to do, But the interest was there. So I started to play it around, and I figured out I can do it a little bit better, So if I cut the straps, if I move like this. So step by step, I was looking for that. But I didn't have the real interest about it because I had other systems. But when I came back to Sardinia, I faced a different scenario because, of course, again, back to dry suit diving, again, back to cold water. So I need more weight. I had to struggle with my own gears of side mount from Mexico. So that was one part where I realized, okay, Toddy, you have to look in a different way. You need to adapt a system which you can use every day for different situations, like C0 back mount diving, like back mount diving in general, then side mount diving, whatever. Try to have one rig which you can use for several diving gears.
And that the traditional school of thought is that you really can't have one size fits all. Most of the units that I've seen, certainly that do back mount and side mount, don't work very well for either. They're a master jack of all trades, master of none. So you think with the Toddy system, you've broken that issue and solved the problem?
Yeah, definitely. So I think many people maybe don't understand the full concept. It's not just like the side mount itself. It's as well a regulated configuration, a particular regulated configuration, which has special designed clips on it for certain purposes, for more streamlined position, for be able to really to go in a situation if there would be a necessity of it, or even as well that you have possibilities to don't block your regulator when you have a bungee on your neck or stuff like that. I had situations where I struggled with that. I had situations as an explorer, you know what I mean, when regulators shifting, when you can't read Welsh because they pushed in the back and you are in tight spaces. So it's not a funny situation. And I realized, okay, I have to redesign, or I have to think about in a smarter way to use my gear to make it more safe. And as well, of course, what everybody is looking for, maybe one gear fit for a lot of other gears. And that's what I tried to figure it out, because in Sardinia, I have a lot of different courses and going on. This day is a sport diving in a cavern. The next day is a CCR cave side mount training. The next day is a CCR back mount training. The next day is an advanced cave side mount training. So I always had different gears, and I tried to combine these gears together. And I figured out if I do that way, I always have the possibility to use my own harness.
Yes.
And that was the main purpose of building up the system. Mm-hmm. And I've done it by myself from 2005 on, and I continue, and I've done a lot of dives, always try to figure it out, make smaller shapes of backplates and clips and shape wings and stuff like that. And I realized after a certain time, when Racer came up into the market and Sidemount diving getting more and more popular, that was a big push for sure. So people ask me, hey, Toddy, what do you dive? Because your system looks completely different than this system on the market now. Yeah. And I said, yeah, it is completely different, but I use my own system because of this and this and this and this. So people really looked for it, and they start to try to dive with the system, and they went happy immediately. So the reaction of my students was a big success to continue further. Yeah. And then they asked me, wow, that's a cool system, and what is the name of that system? And I didn't have any idea, I said, I don't know. It's Toddy Style or whatever.
We should stop there for a moment and just say, cool. Hey, where the hell does this name Toddy come from?
Okay, cool. Actually, the name Toddy, it came from a friend of mine. My name was Thorsten, and Thorsten is kind of a hard name. It's not so easy particularly for American guys, Australian or New Zealand guys. It was like a nickname that I got from a friend, and she told me, hey, look, I call you Toddy. Yeah, I like that. It's funny. And I said, oh, whatever, easy. And since I think 14, 15 or whatever, I have this name. And it stays like that,
Yes, it's funny how they stick, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay. So we've started to talk a bit about your development of the Toddy system. Let's go into it in detail. So it's hard to verbally describe things. Anyone who wants to have a look at a Toddy style system can go to the Protec Sardinia website. I know it's up there. And also you have a specific website for the unit, I think, as well. So I'll put that in the podcast notes. But let's start to describe the unit. And I'm interested in, as you describe it, what makes it special and what makes it stand out from other units in the market.
Okay. So at first, I would like to say that every sidemount on the market is a very good sidemount system. Mm-hmm. There are not a lot of bad systems, okay? And I didn't say as well that my system is the best on the market or whatever. It's just a unique design, and it has unique techniques to dive with. That's one of the things. And I realized that many people come from, let's call them right now, traditional sidemount or whatever, and when they start to dive with my system, they realized, this is a little bit different. This is maybe more clean, more easier to handle because there are exactly right protocols to do. So that was one thing. So because I developed it, not just like the sidemount, I developed as well the techniques of the host configurations, something like that. Because of lots of training I give, I realized, this is way faster to hand over stage, for example, or to go in share and air, or to combine a back mount with a side mount diver, or combine a CCR side mount rebreather diver, for example, with OC side mount diver. So I tried to configure that and try to work with different skills, and that was working. So I think main concept of the system is, let's talk about a side mount itself. It's a sandwich system. That's the original way. Mm-hmm. But these are not original backplates anymore. We redesigned together with Oliver Steinle, my business partner from this project. Together, we designed smaller plates, and it works on top. If you see on top and you have this shield, it's like a protection shield. Mm-hmm. So what happens after many times I dived in very small restricted area in caves, I realized I always have problem. My platters are broken, or it's shaped, or I have to replace it or whatever. So harsh conditions gives me to think. And then I realized, okay, if I cover it with an aluminum backplate or a plate in general, so I have a much smoother way to crawl in and to push myself in. So I'm not thinking right now anymore when I push myself, because it's just working over. It's gliding over the plate. It's just like a super protected area. So it saves a little bit the abrasion of my wing itself, because the wing is designed like a U shape, and it's actually more outside of my body okay, instead of being on top of my body.
Yes.
That's one of the key features of that system. And when people say sometimes, yeah, but with the backplate, it's dangerous to dive in, or you can get locked or whatever, something like that. I don't know. I have thousands of dives with my Sidemount, and I never ever get stuck in a cave like that way. And I'm explorer. I do some stuff and I go in tight spaces, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this was never ever an issue. If you have a corkscrew passage, you wind yourself, you go through as well. That's absolutely no problem at all. But we're talking about extreme diving, of course. But let's go maybe a little bit step back, because I realized what you need is a proper system to add the weight on it. Because many people came over to my center, tri-suit divers, thick undergarments, and stuff like that. And they always struggle at the end with systems on the market. Hey, I don't know where the end I can set up my weight. It's a little bit difficult to do that or do this, you know, and when I have to do it, it takes time and I always have to work on that. So we had a smarter idea, because the inner back plate is completely separated with the outer child protector. So it's a harness system which has a Velcro on it, which we designed as well. And the Velcro is very fast. It's possible to change very fast, because we have some kind of informations inside, just like a measurement, where you can set up left and right harness immediately. Something like 1 minute, you are done. Your shoulder straps are already set up. So the inner back plate designed that you have a possibility to set up just like normal weight that you get from a diving center, 1 kilogram or 2 kilogram, for example. Mm-hmm. So you can set up the weight more to the side. That means the center is more free, and the balance of the system, it helps from the wing and as well from the weight itself. The inner part, you can use a P weight, for example. So you easily come up to 12, 13, 14, 15, almost 16 kilogram in just like in 20, 30 seconds, and all is done, and your weight is shaped. So as well, we designed a butt pad, which is called tail weight, which is direct set up under the butt pad itself. That's again other 2.5 kilogram. So you have a wide range of weight systems which you can add to the system to balance yourself perfectly on the water. And that's what is pretty unique, because you have a lot of flexibilities when people struggle with head forwarded or fins down or something like that. Yeah. You just add the weight how you want, you shift the weight, you help your students to get in a perfect trim position. And that's what makes the system very unique.
Very good. And you talked a little bit about the system itself. So we're talking about 2 back plates which sandwich the BCD in between it, and then there's a harness system that attaches to the back plate. I'm assuming the harness is like a normal harness, shoulder straps, waist strap, crotch strap.
No, it's actually not. The harness is completely separate. For example, what I figured out is, why not have different straps? For example, on the unit, you have 3 separated straps. So the left shoulder strap, the right shoulder strap, and the belt strap, for example, and the cord strap. So what happens is that you don't have this together. When you set up a rig, for example, in this time, it takes me about maybe 10 to 15 minutes for a student or a client, and I set up the rig almost perfectly. Of course, the rest need to be in the water for fine tuning and micro attachments, that's clear. But in general, the system, in 10 to 15 minutes, I'm done. And in the past, I had to struggle with different systems to set up, and you use long-term to shifting D-rings and, and belt straps and stuff like that. I always tried to make this in a fast process. So there is not one belt system like a normal standard backplate. It's completely separated. You can unscrew the left one, you can unscrew the right one, you can unscrew the belt. And in this case, you save a little bit of material, because the pieces you can buy separately and just add by yourself. And you don't have to disassemble the whole unit just to change something. So that's as well the main idea behind the system, to really have a clear system which is very flexible as well as maintenance.
Very good. And you talked a little bit about your hose configuration. So I dive the traditional Bogarthian, so I've got a short left hose, I've got a long hose on the right side, I have a right angle on and a bungee for my left side, and I'll clip with a breakaway on my long hose. So let's talk about how your system differs with the regulator setup.
So I actually dive the same way like many other Sidemount divers at the beginning, because we test a lot of stuff. We test super short hoses, like maybe 50 centimeter hoses, just like clip-on bungees around the necklace in Mexico, for example. Nobody takes care. For everybody, it was clear Sidemount diving that time, it was absolutely independent solo diving. Nobody want to go with you because you've done your job by yourself. You came back, you met each other after a while on the cenote, you collected data, you came back, and that's it. So Sidemount diving was not like a team comfort diving that time. So this time changed, of course, when Sidemount getting more popular, more standard hose length to get into the market and everything. And I tried that as well because I realized, okay, this has to be, of course, this is clear. But I struggled in some way with certain situations where I said to myself, yeah, okay, it's good, it's like that, it's not bad, but I realized this concept was more built like copy a little bit from backmount diving as well, like long hose, like right side and then stuff like that. And I make this clear here. It's a very good system. It works perfectly. There's no question about it. And I'm not saying that my configuration, it has to be like that. That's very, very important. Okay. It's just like another way of thinking, and it's just like another way of processing to make things maybe faster, maybe as well safer in a particular way. That's the only thing what I try to achieve. So what I realized, for example, was like setting up a regulator on the bungee on your neck. It's one thing which is cool. It works well, in particular if you have big case or open space, wreck diving, sport diving, general, absolutely no problem about that. Your alternative gas source is right there where it has to be. It's kind of technical diving concept, but I struggle a little bit with having a breakaway clip on my D-ring, for example, because okay, you clip it away and you stay on your short hose regulator if somebody comes around, need gas or whatever. And this can happen all the time. If people say, yeah, but with Sidemount, you never struggle about that. Maybe self-rescue wise, yes. But what happens if a sport diver comes around the corner or another tech diver or diver in general, he needs some gas. You need to be able to react fast. So I done that test and I played with a lot of people. They had this they have this configuration. And a lot of time I see problems. I see people, they can't reach the regulator properly. A good trained Sidemount diver, no problem at all. But if somebody is new on Sidemount, for example, sometimes they miss it and the time is running, and stuff like that. So, and sometimes it's natural. They try to rip off the regulator in their mouth and they have the bungee around the neck and it doesn't work, So I realized, okay, in my training, particular advanced Sidemount cave training, and cave training in general, I should rethink it. And I've done this since 2005. I start to set up a little bit my own concept of set up the hoses in a way that it works well. So the first thing and the first idea was absolutely, so every regulator which is in your mouth, you need to be able to hand over. It doesn't matter. That's the rule number one in technical diving. That's what we as technical instructors and trainers always teach. The regulator in your mouth is the regulator that you hand over. But why it has to be different right now on Sidemount? Because that makes no sense. The profit of Sidemount is that you have two separate tanks. So why I should go back to a situation which I am in back mount? So that was the main concept. When I realized, okay, I can do it in a different way. So I played with different hose concepts and I realized if I set up on each tank a meter hose, okay, have an elbow on it around 120 degrees or whatever, and I set up the regulator and build it up with a special snap I figured out for a couple of years ago under the regulator. Oh man, it's fast. And I automatically be completely free, but I have the possibility to set it up and clip it back to D-rings. So I played with it and I realized, wow, I'm super fast. I have the possibility, every regulator which is in my mouth, hand over straight away. And I realized that's the way to go on further. I played around as well with the long hose. I realized if I have the long hose on the right side, it's maybe not the best idea because on my configuration on the left side, I have a kind of a inflator hose which goes over the shoulder, which connect direct to the inflator itself. I didn't want to have an inflator again from below like many other systems on the market. I want to stick back to the traditional way, like your left hand is controlling the inflator, like is natural for many, many divers itself. We designed our own kind of a unique adapter as well, and we set it up into the inner plate, but we can talk about later that.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, the inflator was connected on top of the shoulder. I followed the corrugated hose and connected to the inflator itself. In this case, I saw if I have it on the right side and I hand over a tank, where is a long hose attached to it. I saw many people use bungees, put it back, but sometimes the bungees are not good enough, or they are round bungees, so they roll off from the tanks, and then they struggle with long hose, Or sometimes I have mixed teams, which it happens more and more over the last years. A backmount diver get a tank with a 2-meter long hose on it. He never used that before, We are strong believers in stage handling protocols or side mount tank swapping situations because you are faster out of a cave, you are faster on the line, and you don't have to be in a touch contact. We use bump techniques to go out faster on a cave. And we can prove that easily. That's no question about it. So the idea was, okay, why not set up the long hose to the left side, storage in a proper way, and just really, if you need it, you can pull it out and hand it over, for example, to a backmount diver. He needs gas. Mm-hmm. So in this case, you have more flexibilities, you have more possibilities in case of emergency situation, particular in a cave environment or overhead environment. So you can hand him over the long hose. You have the same protocol like 2 back mounters together, and you stay on your right tank. Or the opposite side, if you breathe, for example, from your right tank and the guy needs gas, you just hand over the right regulator, which comes from the right side, but in a fast way, I clip off the tanks, I put a stage loop on top of the neck, and what he get right now is exactly the same stage tank that he get maybe used from other trainings, for example, trimix training or whatever. So he get a proper stage tank, he fixed it on himself, and he twist around the regulator like over the neck, he breathe from it. So I don't have to really explain him how does it work. Maybe he see a strange clip on the regulator and a strange bungee on the neck or on the valve, but that's it. He has 2 clips, he has meter hose on it, and that's it. This is what he is used to. And with tests in my training and my center, with tests from many, many divers, they didn't know what I do right now. I hand over tanks just like in my training to see the development of the techniques. And I realized, wow, that's much simpler, much easier. So that was one way which I figured out. I can prove that. I can show it to people. Videos will follow in the near future for sure to really show side mount diving can be as well in another way. Okay.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's really interesting to go through that because, there is this Bogarthian school. And Steve himself came on the show. He was on episode 3 and 4, and he described the reasoning behind the way that he does things. And it makes a huge amount of sense when you hear it from the guy who kind of developed it. Why do we have the long hose? Well, we're used to using it because that's how we dive back mount. Why do I have a short hose? Well, it's there in place. And if we need to donate, this is a nice, easy way to do it. When he's exploring, he takes the long hose off and puts 2 short hoses on because you don't need the long hose anymore. So there was a really good rationale behind that. But equally, I understand where you're coming from, where you've looked at that and said, okay, hey, there might be a better way. And I was involved in some conversations with Achim Schoffel of ISC around the time that he was promoting some of this as well with the 2 1-meter hoses and donate what you breathe and handing over cylinders. And Achim's going to come on the show in a couple of weeks, I hope. So I'll be able to address it with him as well because I think it's an interesting conversation. And there is no right or wrong. It's just what works, number one, and number 2, figuring out protocols to make sure that whichever method you're using, you can do it safely, quickly. And the objective, of course, is it's an emergency procedure. Make sure you can get out of whatever situation you're in. And I see that ISC appear to have adopted, number 1, the 2 1-meter hose. I know they use the double ender clip that you have on the regulator. So that's quite cool that they've taken that on board as well.
Yeah, that's right. I know Achim spent many years, and other guys like Michael, and they saw which system I use and what I'm doing, and I show them because they've been to Sardinia a couple of times in my center, They saw what I've done, and Achim, he really likes it from the beginning. Actually, they start to take it over in their training agency, which I really like a lot, So you can see there is some movement going on, and there's a different approach. And as well, it's important that people understand every 2 system works fantastic. It doesn't matter what you would like to do and which training agency you go on or which instructor you take. Both systems works well, okay? That's one of the things which I would like to tell. It's just like there are certain areas and certain situations which I realized, in my opinion, it can be better, it can be faster done. But there are always good points and bad points about it. You just need to search a good instructor. You need to learn from him. And if you really have a good instructor, he understands the system very well. You have a good success, and every system which you will dive and every configuration you dive, it will work. No question about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, that whichever you choose, whether it be Bogarthian and you're diving an X-Deep Stealth Tech, or whether you're diving Toddy Style with your 2 1 meter hose configurations, whatever you do, you have to be trained properly, and you have to bed in the skills and practice until they're second nature, such that you can execute when you need to.
Exactly. And for example, what I try to do as well, I try to don't produce any crisscross. That's another thing which I realized. I had corrugated hoses direct on my belly, stuff like that. It came up from the Armadillo system in the past. So I used it, I dived a lot with it, that destroyed couples off, and I realized, okay, sometimes you struggle because you had your long hose underneath, we clipped it over, you didn't take care about that. So I want to go rip off of that. In the configuration I use in the TS system, there is no crisscross situation actually. So every hose is completely free. So your prostate and chest and stomach is completely free. So if you glide into a batting plan, for example, you can push. You don't need to think about, oh, my corrugated hose is now below me or whatever. No, it's not. It's completely free. So you can feel your breath on stones or whatever. You have a better feeling about it, a more comfortable feeling if you do dives like that.
Right.
And as well, diving in general, you always see the long hose configuration is exactly the same configuration as the 1 meter hose concept on the left side. It's just a little bit of hose which is direct attached to the tank itself, but you don't realize it the first time because it's protected between tank and between body. If you really look deeply, sometimes you can see divers with a long hose attached to it because we teach that in the class. It's not that we don't teach 2 meter hose. We teach 2 meter hose because we need these guys, this divers, having ready for other programs. Like they want to go in cave or they want to do some trimix diving. They need to understand how to use a long hose, and we teach that. That's for sure, okay? So sometimes people say, yeah, but in the TS system, you don't use a long hose. And that's not true. We use long hoses because we train them. I am a fan of it, not really. But of course, I train. If a guy comes and he want to do a Sidemount cave training with us, he dives with a long hose, that's clear. But afterwards, we show him as well that he knows the technique from the TS user courses or the Tech TS Sidemount training, for example. He knows to understand the meter hose concept. So he can decide which direction you want to do and what he would like to go. If he goes just with Sidemount divers in the future cave diving just for fun, why he has to take a long hose with him. So in 2 minutes, he can change that and he can make it very easy about that. So that was one of the key points where I said in my configuration, this is a benefit about it. So adapt to certain situations and adapt to environments where you want to go.
Let me ask you a question around something that I think flows on from this. So when you go to the donate what you breathe to 1 meter hose configuration and you're donating a cylinder, I think from the conversations I had with Akim, it needs to be an aluminium cylinder now. So you can't dive steels. Is that correct?
It's correct because, of course, an aluminium cylinder is much more actually useful in particular situations like that. So to hand over an aluminium tank, every Sidemount diver knows that. It's much easier. You can hand it over. That's fine. We prefer aluminium tanks in the configuration because in further trainings, we do a lot of diving with aluminium tanks, and we do a lot of these protocols like tank handover protocols, like Sidemount CCR, for example, back mount system or side mount systems or whatever. So aluminium is way faster. But of course, as well, here we are back. Sometimes we have people, they say, Toddy, I'm not a cave diver and I don't want to do cave diving, but I'm diving in cold lakes or whatever. And I have 2 12-liter steel tanks here. I said, yeah, cool, take it. The system is not limited to aluminium tanks. You just can choose whatever you want. You can have 7-liter steel tanks on it. You can have 12-liter steel tanks on it. In Florida, I dive with 20-liter steel tanks. That's all possible, and it's not a big problem. But you just need to know and to understand if you have certain techniques or you want to explore or you want to hand over or handheld tank positions a lot of time, Steel tanks are definitely not the best option. Okay.
Right.
Any kind of tanks you can attach to the system. But we prefer aluminum tanks because we realized that's way faster for many, many diving situations. And for continuous training in technical diving, definitely better. That's it.
Yeah, I understand. And so I'm assuming if you do dive steel tanks, that would be an example of an occasion where you might carry a long hose on the left and donate that long hose rather than what you're breathing. Would that be true?
Exactly. That's a good example. You definitely don't want to hand over tanks, for example. So you want to stick on the long hose. Absolutely. You need to set up the long hose on it, and then you hand over the regulator from that situation right now. And of course, even if it's clipped or not clipped, it's the same situation. Like a breakaway, you have to break away. Or you have to open a clip, That's not a big issue.
Really cool. So I will have some information on the podcast notes on how to look up more on Toddy Style. And that was a great explanation. So thank you. Coming straight from the man himself. So as you were talking about Sardinia, my eyes were lighting up. I've spent a bit of time in Gozo and I love it there. And I'd love to pop up to Sardinia and have a look. Let's talk some more about what's there, because on your website, I saw some pictures of wreck diving. I saw some pictures of cave diving. What styles of diving do you have there?
So Sardinia, where I have my diving center, is a place called Calagonone, and it's on the east coast of Sardinia. And the area there is a huge karst mountain area, has amazing cave system, particularly as well, dry caving a lot. There are around 2,000 registered caves just in that region. So in the Catasta, you can see that. And as well, you have amazing huge cave systems. Actually, the outlet is at the sea because they don't have really rivers in the Supramundo. All the rivers are actually underground. So all these rivers are floating down to the sea and actually are pushing out from the sea. Okay. So, and there are about 6 main huge cave systems available in the area in a 45 kilometers length of coastline, 700 meter high cliffs, super nice limestone areas, huge canyons, white beaches, turquoise blue water. So it's a fascinating landscape, which keeps me attracted from the beginning. And I would open a cave training facility at the beginning, straight at the beginning, and nobody been there so far. There was 2 sport diving centers there. That's it. So I came in 2005 and opened a center particular for cave divers to train there. So of course, from my background, from my training before, my living in Mexico and before from my centers, I had people around in Europe. They asked me, "Hey, Toddy, what are you doing? Where you go?" And I said, "I go to Sardinia. There are caves." And they ask, "Okay, when there are caves, we come." So it starts like that, no? And sometimes people say, I'm not sure if there are caves. I said, "Look, you don't have to come down." Then I go cave diving by myself. So it was like that. So people came over, and they started diving with me, and they realized, wow, that's amazing, amazing area. So I actually open it up to the cave world in Europe. I open up an area, a cave terrain area right now, which has a big name, strong name, influence right now in the whole Europe. So I'm proud of that. And of course, what I always try to do is preserve the cave. So we've done a lot of work in this case, cleaning up the cave with rubbiches, what was there inside, built it over years from military divers, old cave divers or whatever. Nobody takes care, So I take the job over. I worked with speleo groups. I worked with Comuna together from the region to just help to clean up the caves, install just one lines, make this clear and try to protect the area. And as well, in the other hand, try to let open this cave territory because you know how it is fast, a cave territory can be closed. And I don't want that. I want to open it for all people around the world. And actually people come over right now and other instructors are actually teaching there and stuff like that. So,
And the caves, are they on private land or is it publicly owned land?
No, it's not private. It's public open. But of course you need special permissions to work there, to have the possibility to drive with your boat to the cave entrances. And as well, you need permissions sometimes from operators. They do some dry caving tours and you need permission to enter under the water. This I got. I'm happy for that. And then you have the possibility to enter into the caves. And the caves are tremendous. There is 5 minutes from the harbor is the first cave system, and it's actually Italian's biggest cave system so far, over 73 kilometers long. And then other systems are following 6 kilometers, 8 kilometers, stuff like that. So they're quite huge system to dive, very complex. So that makes the training fascinating. You have different shapes of the caves, like big tunnels, deeper caves, small, shallow caves, whatever you would like to have.
Did I understand you correctly that you're entering them as sea caves, or are you entering from sinkholes?
Yeah, we're entering from sea caves. So I have 2 boats. So we load the boats in the harbor, and then we start to drive out from the sea. So we anchor in front of the cave entrances. We jump in the water and actually start a dive. And then we do a fun dive. We come back to the boat and we drive back to the shore and have a good pizza.
So awesome. So are you diving saltwater or fresh, or does it change as you're diving? Or
yeah, that's the challenge, because we actually enter from saltwater, and of course in summertime we have temperatures of 26, 27 degrees, something like that.
Yeah.
And when we start to enter the cave, we dive through called the anchor line zone, which you have some warmer pools, so salt water down, and fresh water is streaming over the salt water out of the cave. So we face 2 medias. So we deal with salt and we deal with fresh water. At a certain stage, we actually dive from salt water straight into fresh water. And of course, the buoyancy changes dramatically. You need to control it, and then you go further. So most of the time, you dive then in fresh water, which is around 15 degrees, constantly all the year round.
Right. So you've got a large thermocline to go through and a halocline as well, I'm assuming.
Oh yes. A lot of haloclines. So it looks pretty cool. We have some areas where mind-blowing, fantastic.
Yeah, interesting. Are there, in fact, sinkholes that you can access the caves via the land, or is that just not really possible? Or does it involve dry caving?
Yeah, exactly. So you have access on dry land caves. And that's what I do as my other passion is as well, is dry caving. I love dry caving. And I have really good contacts to certain speleo groups from Sardinia. So I have a luxury because they know how crazy I am and what I'm doing in cave diving. So over the years, I built up a trust with them. And when there is some area where they say, hey, look, Toddy, a couple of hours away in the dry cave, we found a water pool, we found a siphon. So then I go, so we go together with a team, sometimes 20, 30 people for a project for multiple days, for example. And then I have a luxury to explore some absolutely remote areas, siphon terrains as well. And I do multiple subdiving there and do exploration. So I'm involved in certain projects in the Supramonte area. But it's not that I can bring people there and we do something like that. That's absolutely impossible, So the background about that and the terminology and organization is definitely another world, that's for sure.
Yeah, understood. And I saw there was wreck diving as well and other types of diving available?
Yes, right. We have 2 kinds of wrecks from the World War II. There are in around 34, 35 meters left. And that's pretty nice, fantastic, good for training. We do as well often Sidemount training there, having fun, play around. And we have another wreck, which we found, we get for a couple of years ago, information typical from a fisherman. He came over. And actually, Achim Schliffel was here at that time. So he had a camera with us. So actually, we went out together and we done a dive. So I was the first down. And this is a wreck, 120 meters long. It lies in a depth minus 90 meters. So 270 feet. And it was breathtaking. It was 3 decks on it and really amazing preserved, lots of begonia on it and lots of stuff on it. So we offer trimix trips to that wreck, ideal for CTR divers, for example, or of course, trimix open circuit divers. So we spend a lot of time there. We installed shot lines so we can proper anchor there. I have deco rigs available where I can stay on your decompression on 12.9 and 6 meters. So everything is super comfortable. We can go in 3 trip deco station, for example. So that's what I offer as well. But the main job, what we do, I guess around maybe 85, 90% is definitely cave diving and cave training in any way.
Yeah. And are you associated with the Protec centers in Mexico? Is they part of the same group or is it completely separate?
It's completely separated, but I know Patrick Weidman is a friend of mine. And I know the other guys, Kim Davidson, for example. And I actually start with Protec helping them in 2001, 2002. The old owners, Scott Canahan, for example, Mike and Matt, Andreas Matis from Germany. So these guys run the show before Protec Mexico. So I helped them out and stuff like that. And when I actually went to Sardinia, I asked the guys, hey guys, I like the name a lot. Protec is cool. Is there any problem if I can use the Protec name in Europe? And they say, no problem about that. But it was not a business plan of making something together. From day one, it was all the time separated. Right. But I had the possibility to use that. And that gives a benefit because sometimes I send people to the guys and they send people to me. Yep. So this is absolutely no problem at all. But there are two separated companies.
Yeah, understood. So that's been awesome to, number one, cover the Toddy system, and then number two, talk about Protec Sardinia. The other thing that I really wanted to talk to you today is about side mount rebreathers. And I saw from your website that you've been associated with the T-Reb. And as I mentioned to you off mic on previous shows, I've spoken to Steve Bogarts and Jill Heineth about the Liberty. I've spoken to Gary Dallas about the SF2, Brian Kaycook about the Sidekick, also Tom Crisp. I've got a pretty broad background, but the T-Reb is new to me and I've heard very, very good things. So I'm interested a little bit about your association with T-Reb and also tell us a bit about the side mount rebreather in particular.
Sure. So my side mount rebreather background is actually, it starts around 2008, 2009, something like that. I saw as well a unit from Rick Stanton, is a friend of mine, and he built his own side mount rebreather. And the concept of the rebreather was actually the counterlungs on top and the scrubber below. And he used it for the dual CTR techniques, which he used a case in the back and his own system on the side. And I was fascinated about it. So I started to rebuild the unit and copy a unit from him. But then I had a possibility to saw the SF2 back mount system in my center. And the constructor at that time was there. I think it was 2009 or 2010, something like that. So I saw the unit and I said, hey, why not I build a side mount rebreather from it, or we build a side mount rebreather from it with different changes. This is fast done, no problem. So a week later, I get a unit. I've done the first dive with the SF2 side mount rebreather. I still have a video on that. And I saw how does it work. And I saw, oh, wow. So this is not bad. This is a cool machine. So I done some modifications, some clip techniques and stuff like that, like the dual clip technique and stuff like that to counterbalance the counterlung. I had some fun with the unit, done a lot of dives with the unit. But for, I think 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Paco Slavik from Poland, he told me, look, Toddy, we come to Mexico and a friend of mine is with me. His name is Andrei Palusha. And he has a side mount rebreather, which you have to look about it. I said, yeah, sure, why not? It's cool. Let's do it. So we met each other and I saw the unit and I was like, wow, that's cool stuff. And the design was actually just like Rick Stanton's design from 2000, whatever, 4, 5, or 6, how he built it. I think 6. So I was like, wow, that's the way of building a side mount rebreather. But he had some pads in front, where the sensor pad in front, a loop on top. It was not really all covered. Everything was a little bit more open, more complicated. But I'd done a dive with it. It was in Mexico in Casas del Norte. And I was fascinated of the briefing pattern of the system. The warp briefing was super cool. So ups and downs, no problem at all, super stable on the side. So we sit on the table and I said, look, guys, I think you have kind of an amazing machine in your hands, but not ready for a market yet. I think you need to do some work on it. So then designs followed, ideas followed, where I said, look, all that, what you have in front, all the sensors need to be into the unit between the scrubber and as well the counterlungs. And he started to design it, and frequently he sent units over. And we start to play with it and always third things on it. Like, for example, the sensor pad is involved with, there's a battery inside. So it controls just like the controller. So the controller is super slim, super easy. And the sensor pad, I call them motherboard right now. You just take off, you put it in your pouch. It can dry easily, stuff like that. It's a radial scrubber of 2.5 kilograms on it. Different designs of solenoids, for example. How the solenoid injector is working is sealed, how the electronics part are completely separated from digital information and electrical information as well, sealed completely. So lots of designs happen, lots of different things happens. but manufacture-wise is an amazing machine. And diving-wise, so far, I never dive a better machine, which is really, really good. The idea of the system is it's an absolutely own Sidemount rebreather system. So you can't convert to a back mount system. Absolutely not. This is a machine built for Sidemount divers, okay? And this is where we stand right now. That's why it's very slim. That's why it's super compact. That's why it works on the side, almost like an 80 coof tank. You don't feel a lot of differences about it. You can be dive stable, super nice in 3, 4, 5 meters water column, and you don't struggle about buoyancy or something like that. So that's what fascinated me. That's why we are working on 3 years right now. And of course, for European followers right now on this podcast show, the system is in the process of getting a CE certification. So most of the tests are done. We are working hard on it to release it as soon as possible, hopefully April, May. And then as well, we start training on the units, stuff like that. And then let's see where it goes, you know?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And so you're actually involved in the development of the product now, or involved with T-Reb?
So I'm actually involved in helping designing the system. So it's not my own product. It's other Gravity. It's these two guys. They run the company. But me and my partner, Oliver Steiner, we have a company called Sidemount Explorer. And we actually distribute the unit then worldwide. So I have the luxury of being a factory trainer and a I&D instructor trainer of that unit. So my job is spreading around and travel with the system and teach upcoming instructors and bring this unit to the market. That's actually my job in the future as well.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And so you're saying it's ready now, or it will be coming out soon with CE?
Absolutely, absolutely. On the boat show in Düsseldorf, we actually showed the pending system right now, the CE pending system. So pretty sure this year is our year. It was struggling the last 2 years because it's not easy to get a CE certification. And it is actually really the first Sidemount rebreather on the market, fully Sidemount rebreather, which will have then a CE certification, which we are proud on it. But we had to work it right. We had to work it 100% to make this thing going on, because I love side mount diving in any form, and I love Sidemount rebreather diving since over 12, 13 years right now. So for me, it was a big step to get involved in this project, and I love the machine a lot. So we use it as well. I go to Mexico soon. We have an exploration project called Vanilla Sky Project, and we use, since the last 2 years, T-Rebs in this expedition. And right now we are actually 5 T-Reb divers already in the project. So it's pretty cool to see how the people get used to it and how we can use it as well in exploration. That's sometimes a little bit weird or was difficult in the past. Right now, we can enter areas where we dreamed before to bring a rebreather on. Now we have the luxury to use rebreathers, not constantly, not all the time, but a lot of time, or for deeper parts of cave exploration, we use it really good.
Yeah, and it looked amazing. I think I saw a picture of you with a back mount rebreather using the T-Reb as a redundant rebreather as well in lieu of bailout. So that looked pretty cool.
Yeah, that's another project which I do since a couple of years. I'm working more and more on my dual system, and I tested different back mount rebreathers. I have a background from since 2000 about rebreather diving, but I'm sticking on a KISS right now, modified to 5 kilograms of scrubber. And I have the T-Reb on the side. So I combine both rebreathers in a particular setup, which gives me a lot of opportunities. And particularly here in Sardinia, I'm pushing a cave system called Utopia, which I try to push further than nobody else before, between 22 of July to 28 of July. So for that reason, I need a very stable dual CCR setup. I actually use triple CCR in that exploration, and I maybe reach about 20 to 25 hours diving time, stuff like that. So I'm really depends on rebreathers right now. And the dual system, so far, the T-Reb gives me amazing flexibility because of programming in a way that I can use it like a backup CCR system. So it's kind of a sleeping modus. And if I want to go onto the system, I can wake it up and then I can use it. So we try a lot what we can do, and so far it works fantastic with it. It's a cool bob system in the future as well for frac divers, deep frac divers. They just want to set up the rebreather on the side And just in case something happens with the main rebreather, they can switch to the Sidemount rebreather. But of course, dual CCR diving is a complicated way. And I say this to all students and everything. And I said, look, guys, dual CCR diving is not just like having fun in 5 meters and play around. It looks cool. It's a lot of technique involved, a lot of training involved to be ready with 2 machines, in particular in the world of cave or in the world of deep diving. So careful with that. Maybe there are programs in the future going on. It will come, that's for sure. People are asking more and more about that. Yeah. But important is get a proper training. But
Yeah, I think I point these things out to point out the extreme limits of CCR diving, because certainly there's, number one, there's the training. Number two, there's the cost, right? I think you were talking of having 3 CCR units on there, and here I am saving my pennies for my first one, right? So, and I'm sure there's many people in that. And it's not just the unit. I mean, you've got to buy the unit and then you have to go and get the right training. And so, it's an expensive proposition, and you need to think through carefully whether you need one, number one, and then number 2, which one you're going to choose. So thank you for sharing. I enjoyed that, and I'm very, very interested. So I'll reach out to you separately and get some more info on that for myself. Certainly for me, I've said this before on the show, I'm a side mount diver. So I don't really have a desire to go to a back mount rebreather. I think I already have all the muscle memory and everything set as a side mount diver. So I'd prefer to continue that way. And if there's a rebreather that can support that for the sort of diving I do, which is deep rec and cave, then that's exactly what I'm looking for. So excited to hear more.
Very good. Absolutely.
Well, Toddy, we've gone for nearly 70 minutes, I think. It's almost like a dive duration. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Good run time, I think, for us. And I appreciate your time in the evening in Europe, and it's the morning here in New Zealand. And it's been a pleasure to meet you. And I've enjoyed hearing both about the Toddy system and also about your own background in Sardinia and the T-Reb. So thank you very much for sharing with us.
Absolutely. It's well a pleasure for me, Steve, to be able to talk in your podcast, your show. It's pretty awesome, man. I really like the idea what you do. So bring people together, bring experts together, give them the possibility to share their ideas and stuff like that. So thank you a lot.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And just a background on that, Toddy and I spoke off mic about the concept of the podcast, and it is very much that about bringing the world's best divers and people with interesting aspects or perspectives. And this is an example of that. Toddy and I don't dive the same way together, and yet we can have a meaningful conversation about the benefits of the system that you have. So thanks very much, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.